Hey, 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 it's me, MC of Healthy by George. And I'm coming to live tonight because I really want to share where are we right now with checking in on our wellness plans for the year. January is really the time where we start to think about where do I want to be by the end of this year? And typically, most adults, as we hear often on all the news channels, on all the podcasts, on all the YouTube channels, we hear nothing but people stop whatever it is that they've decided to choose to do and be by the end of this month. So I really want to encourage you, and that's why I'm coming here live, to think again, to choose again. I love Gabby Bernstein when she talks about we can always choose again. And I think that's really the beauty of being a human being is we have such an amazing capacity for choice. We can choose how we want to feel from moment to moment. We can choose how we think. We can choose how we act. And I think that's the critical thing. As an adult, as an older adult, one of the biggest things that we need to think about, especially in this freezing cold weather, is that we need to understand how to protect ourselves, how to be careful and protect ourselves from the risks of falls. Falls are just so huge as a risk for older adults. It's a risk for fracture, it's a risk for severe injury. And so if you are going out and about, like what are you wearing, especially if you're not in an area where you're used to all of this ice and cold weather. I have to tell you, it's quite impressive in the areas of like Tennessee, and I forget where else they've got all the ice, and it's all this electricity and power down, and it's just disturbing that so many people are without power, and that means without heat. So I'm hoping that you're wearing layers. I'm hoping that maybe you went and moved in with some family or friends who have electricity, because truthfully, as we get older, we're just not as capable of bouncing back from dehydration or getting overly cold. I think it's really, really key. And I just can't share with you enough how these things concern me as well. The ice here in New York where I live is impressive, but it's a little bit better right now because they really know how to clean the streets. So at least I can walk around the block with my dog, but truthfully, it's so bitterly cold despite the layers. It's miserable to be outside. Tomorrow, I'm going to make an attempt to go into my office despite this cold weather, and I just have to try and make at least one attempt to get into the office this week. And it's just going to get colder, which is what I tell you, it's really frustrating to have to be dealing with the cold. And I'm grateful that I have power. I'm grateful that I have heat, and I'm praying for all of you who are struggling without heat and without power, and it's still unclear as to when your power and your heat will be turned on. So really do not open the oven and turn on the oven. Do something else. Go stay at a neighbor's and warm up. Layer up with blankets and just do whatever you can to stay warm, because it's truly an unbelievable cold front that we're dealing with, and I think it's going to go through the weekend. So, the other issue as an older adult that we really need to be conscious about, and I want to come on here and encourage you that we really should take the time and do a checklist of all of the things that we need to give attention to that means taking care of our health and wellness. And truthfully, it's one key thing. It's going to get your checkups. It's seeing your primary care provider. Now, I choose every year to link my care to my birthday. So that means that I'm going to be seeing my primary care providers. I'm going to get my prescriptions for the mammogram and for the follow-up care with my OBGYN. And I'm going to get my follow-up care for when I need to get the colonoscopy. It's already in the calendar. I don't have to do it, thank God, for another several years. So, how are you considering what kind of care do you need to follow up on? When's the last time you saw the dentist? When is the last time you had your vision checked? This is a really big thing. I kind of ran into that to share a story. I was going through menopause and all of a sudden my eyes were flaming red. I had no idea that menopause caused your eyes to suffer from dryness. I had no idea. And so here I am on vacation and my eyes are bloodshot red. I look like I've been smoking marijuana for days. And I had no idea. Nothing made it better. I got all kinds of stuff from the drugstore. Nothing made the eyes get better from the redness until I got home and saw my doctor for my vision care. And sure enough, I'm suffering from dryness of my eyes. And so I'm taking a medication once in the morning and once a night to prevent the dryness. And that's something that's really crucial because the biggest risk we have as we get older are two things: glaucoma and cataracts. Those are two very common problems that we need to stay on top of. And that's why it's very important to see your eye doctor at least once a year. Not only because of that, but because of the way that our vision changes as we get older. I know many people who have nearsightedness or farsightedness, that their vision changes. And so, if you're someone who is nearsighted, I'm nearsighted. And so, my vision hasn't changed that much. Like, I don't need readers. I'm, I'm never going to see in the distance. But I know some people who are farsighted, they have trouble now, I think, with seeing near. And so they're using readers a lot. I'm really fortunate. I don't need readers. I just need to see where I'm going in a distance. But where are you with your vision care? When's the last time you saw an eye doctor? When is the last time you had your hearing checked? So often hearing is a challenge as we get older. I know for my family, it's a genetic condition on my mother's side. I grew up with a great grandmother. She was beautiful. I absolutely adored Grandma Reed. She had this long, beautiful silver hair that went down to her waist, and we would watch it every night when she would comb it and put it up into a very neat little bun. But she had very little hearing, like absolutely none. She had some hearing aids, I think, to help her a little bit. But the truth was, she couldn't really hear much at all. And this was so many years back when there weren't these great devices that you can use and purchase. I mean, they are expensive, and I don't think many insurances cover them, but I think you can get some insurance coverage through AARP and through Medicare. Or if you're on Medicaid, you can get some coverage for hearing assistance. The other thing is there are some amazing apps where you can have all kinds of things that help you hear, but not through the actual audible sound, but through the text. You can keep track of what people are saying because the text is picking it up through the app. That to me is phenomenal. And so you can be included in a conversation that's happening, and truthfully, that's the challenge if you're having hearing difficulties. It really is something that allows you to feel less connected. There's a feeling of isolation. So please, 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 if you haven't, and you're someone like myself over the age of 65, if you haven't had your hearing checked, don't wait till you have difficulty or somebody's telling you that you don't hear what I'm saying. Go ahead, schedule that appointment to get your hearing initially tested. I did this because it's genetically something that's in my family. Just like, I know that there is heart disease in my family. So one of the things that I did this past last year was I started getting additional heart measures done. And I'm thinking of getting something that's called a calcium scan of my heart because you can't ignore what your family history is. While you may be doing things that are good as far as nutrition and movement and other issues, there is this issue of our family history and our genetic predispositions that contributes to how we will age. So, why not get ahead of the process? Check in with your doctor, have a conversation about what your genetic family predispositions are. I know that this is something that everyone should consider. And in fact, some of the hardest things about having awareness about your family history is the fact that none of us know what it is. I come from a very large family. I think my father had um, on his he had something like, I don't know, 8 or 9 uncles and 2 aunts. I think there were 11 children, and my mother, on her great-grandmother's side, there were quite a number of brothers and sisters, another great big family. Now, her immediate family was, 5 girls plus her, which 6, but my father's family was 3. And truthfully, heart disease on my father's side was impressive. There were all kinds of stories of an uncle that, had a heart attack out in the middle of a golf field. There was another stroke that happened. I mean, it was just enormous of what the heart risk is in my family. And some of this was caused by lifestyle. Many of my family were big smokers. In those days, smoking was very common. It's not as common nowadays, but I think it's coming back into style, which is very concerning to see young people all of a sudden promoting cigarette smoking, which is discouraging because it's clearly something that has carcinogenic effects on our body and our tissues. So, know what your family history is. And if you don't know, ask questions, get some ideas of why it is that someone passed in the past in your family or what their struggles were, or, because that's a big thing, especially when it comes to our mental health. Alzheimer's and dementia is something that we're all thinking about because it's so relevant as we get older. How much can I do to help myself cognitively with my thinking processes? How can I help myself? And one of the biggest things is to do things that you don't know how to do. you know, and as an older adult, guess what? Many of the things we don't know how to do have to do with the computer or software or learning to read music or languages or discovering some challenging puzzle or practice or a new way of moving, anything that's going to give you that discomfort of learning is so amazing. I heard this story today on Huberman Labs. He talked about how they did a study of nuns who were elderly. And when they had passed, they had donated their brains to science. And when they looked at these women's brains and saw that there was dementia amongst the group, yet none of them displayed any of the signs of what we commonly see in dementia because they were constantly troubleshooting. They were constantly doing something challenging. In fact, I had another friend of mine tell me about I think their great grandmother, who is like 93, she still works part time and does troubleshooting for a company administratively 3 days a week. And it's kept her vibrant and challenging. And who knows what the condition of her brain is, but she's still engaging very vigorously every single week. And that's what we must think about when it comes to dementia and Alzheimer's is that now is the time in our 60s or even as early as our 50s to challenge ourselves to learn new things, to discover things that make us feel uncomfortable at the beginning, have a child's mind about learning. I think that that is phenomenal if we can keep embracing that action. So, truthfully, movement and challenging ourselves are two of the biggest things that we can do to help ourselves with any type of thinking processes, especially for our troubleshooting, problem solving. It's good to do the what they s- the crossword puzzles, but if you get really good at something, it's no longer going to be the thing that keeps your brain healthy and stimulated. You got to move to the next thing that's hard to do. So it's good to learn how to do hard things no matter what. So maybe once a year you choose something to learn as a way for you to discover more ways to keep your brain healthy and thriving. The other key issue is movement. As an older adult, and especially in this cold weather, it's very challenging to be moving. It's just so freaking cold outside. And so, they recommend you get 150 minutes of moderate exercise every week. And it's like, oh, Lordy. There's just so many things that you can do. But when it's cold and kind of, you know, dark and somber feeling, you don't feel like it. So I'm challenging myself, and I hope you'll be challenging yourselves as well to, step up, put on your favorite music, put on your favorite mystery show or murder show or any type of there's so many things that we can watch on Netflix or Prime or Hulu or any kind of streaming channel. Do a few minutes of some exercises, stepping back and forth, lifting your knees. Even if it has to be seated, it's better to move. And I've been doing a little bit of that. I promised myself 5 minutes. So I set the timer on 5 minutes. And I at least start off by 5 minutes. And I go through the action because sometimes it's just difficult to do two things at once, watch a show and move. It's easier if you're listening to a podcast, I think. But, it still is a challenge to do it. I like exercising, and maybe when the weather gets warmer, I think I'll find a way to the gym, and that will help me give myself a little more structure. But now when it's like, it is -1 degrees here in New York. And frankly, if I don't know how you're dealing with the cold, leave in the comments either later or now that you are managing in this cold weather because frankly, the cold weather has just it has me down. So how are you coping with all of this cold weather? I'm doing a little more reading of some books that I really want to do and doing some tasks that I don't normally like to do and definitely doing some throwing away of things because this is the last week of January and I really wanted things to get really organized and straightened up and I still haven't quite accomplished that. The other thing is older adults that we have to really consider as the last week of January is the IRS. You know, as an older adult, and when my husband was alive, the biggest thing that was so discouraging is that he became a target. I think we got a bazillion phone calls from strange people trying to sell my husband something. And because my husband had multiple sclerosis, he was cognitively challenged. And so the first several times that this happened, and I didn't really realize that it was happening. He like purchased, I don't know, some kind of product that would come every month. It was like $95. It was ridiculous. Yet someone sold him this on the telephone. And it just became a bigger and bigger problem. And so finally, I got rid of the landline because it became such a big issue. Now it's a little bit better because you can block phone calls. But even still, scammers that say they're from the IRS or they say they're from Social Security, they're out there. And because of AI, it is getting more and more clever. In fact, I got an email that looked so valid from someplace that said, click on this link and do that. And I thought, oh, wait a minute. And so I checked the who it was from. I then went back to the original site of where it was originating, and it was totally a scam. Yet, you really do get fooled looking at the email. You get fooled when you see someone calling you that it looks like the IRS calling you, or it looks like Social Security. And we have to constantly remind ourselves that they will not call us. Social Security won't call you, the IRS won't call you, and Medicare will not call you. So if somebody's calling you and telling you that they're the IRS or Social Security or Medicare, hang up. Just hang up. Don't answer it. And that's the way to protect ourselves. The other thing is to file our taxes early, because so often scammers can get in there and pretend they're who we are and file our taxes fraudulently. And now our taxes are somewhere out in the outer space. So, so often we as older adults, we need a little more time to think things through. I mean, do you find yourself having to kind of like connect the dots or think a little through line of what it is that you need or what you need to follow up with? Don't let yourself be fooled. Start early. Start now to get your taxes in the first couple of weeks of February so that you're ahead of the scammers, so that you don't have that process of somebody stealing your information. The thing about the IRS just really frustrates me that people are still working with AI to scam you. So don't trust anything. I've gotten to where I don't trust one single thing, not an email, not a phone message, nothing. And I just feel like if it's somebody saying they're X, Y, and Z, I don't believe it. I hang it up and I call the X, Y, and Z, or I check in with the X, Y, and Z. Or what you can do is you can put into the chat GPT or even into Google and say, is this type of thing a scam? And guess what? You'll get a message that says, yes, this is a scam. So, you know what? 99% of the time, it's a scam. So be careful. That is the key. As an older adult, the biggest thing that we have to do is be careful with our finances. The other issue is isolation. With this cold weather, it's so difficult to feel like we're going out, we're doing things to help ourselves, we're checking in with friends or family. So take advantage of the fact that we have so many things available. We have FaceTime, we have Zooms, we have so many ways that if we can't physically get out, reach out and see if you can talk to your nephews and nieces on Zoom or FaceTime. Reach out and see if there's a friend that you can connect with on FaceTime or Zoom. Do anything that you can to keep yourself from being isolated. We need connection. That's another thing for our mental and health well-being is the connection that we need. It stimulates us. It makes us feel like we're part of something bigger than just ourselves. And it's so important. I'm so thrilled that I have a dog, I have a partner, I have a very busy life of doing things that interest me and engage me. And I encourage you to do that too. If there's something that you've always wanted to do, choose to do it. This is the time, the last week of January. Make a decision. If you've always wanted to paint, paint. If you've always wanted to scrapbook, scrapbook. If you've always wanted to do just something creative, just start anywhere. Anywhere is perfect. If you want to do nothing but tear out pictures from a magazine and make a collage, I have seen so many phenomenal things. I was watching an artist the other day. He was taking some kind of a sparkly powder and outlining a picture on a black piece of contact paper. It was phenomenal. So I encourage you to play. Play with something that you feel like stimulates you. Play with paint, play with powder. I can even see that, why not? Do anything. It's important to explore the creative side of you. I know for me, I love playing. I love imagination. I'm reading this amazing book by Josh Pais. I love it. How it talks about living in your body in the present moment. That is a powerful, powerful skill. And what one thing has taught me is that improvisation has taught me to be present to myself and to whoever I am sharing with in the moment, to not allow myself to be distracted, but to be energetically, physically, mentally, spiritually connected in the moment. And it just makes you feel so alive physically. You feel this aliveness that I think sometimes if we're all in our head all the time, we don't feel so alive. We feel like we're just a mind walking around in a body. But if you really get to connect it to your body, your feeling, the sensation of the fact that you're a 3D creature, you're not just a flat piece of a picture on a page. You're more than that. And that's one of the things that I think is phenomenal. And that's what inspires me to do this channel. I started with Healthy by George because of my father. My father passed away due to a long challenge of dealing with diabetes and heart disease. And I really feel like he was not given the education about his health that he could have had. And I think many of us all adults, that's one of the things that's really surprising when you look at what we call health literacy. Health literacy is amazingly short. Only 12% of adults have sufficient health literacy about their well being. That's really low. And I think we're bombarded with so much information that it's hard to know what it is that we need to focus on. And that's why what my encouragement is always to be the research of one, your research for you and what matters to you. I think what always really sounded the bell with me was my husband. And there's my sweet Pete telling me it's almost time to go. My husband, when he was alive, he said he knew what mattered to him, what made him feel better, what made him do better, what made him feel capable. And I felt angry at the beginning of his illness about that issue. And the truth was, I was wrong. He was right. He was the most informed person about his chronic illness of multiple sclerosis, not me, not his doctor, not anyone. He was the one person experiencing multiple sclerosis as a challenge every single day. And there was no way that I could ever know what his vision was like, what his sense of balance was like. And when I tried to talk to the doctors about it, they told me it was like, he was constantly walking in a circumstances of feeling off balance and that his vision was constantly distorted. And I can't even imagine what that's like to deal with day in and day out. And what's so challenging when people have chronic illnesses that are present is sometimes they don't look it. He would fuss sometimes when we go to the grocery store that people just would do things very difficult for him. And even though he was using a cane, they still would not be aware of the fact that, to give him space that he was disabled or he wasn't as abled body as someone who didn't have multiple sclerosis. So we never know how each of us are walking in our shoes every day with any kind of health or wellness challenges. And that's why we need to start with ourselves. Be kind to ourselves. Be clear about ourselves, do a checkup. Get our vision, get our hearing, get whatever you need to be tested this year. Get it scheduled. See the dentist. I think that's the one thing I have on my list to get scheduled. And that's important. All of these things contribute to the wholeness of us being a thriving, vivacious person well into our 80s and 90s. And I think that's really what drives me is I believe that if my father had gotten some education about his diabetes, that he truly would have been someone who lived longer and we could have had a more in invigorating and loving experience with him on this earth longer, and that would have been lovely. And I think that's true with many of the people who passed in my family, is that they really their lives were cut short because of it's just difficult sometimes to understand what it is we need to do daily for our health and wellness. So thank you for joining me here. And remember, be well, my friends. We have this one precious life right now in this moment, being present to ourselves and to others. Let's live it fully. And please join me here. I'm going to be trying to go live at least once a month, if not more frequent, because I really feel so passionate about helping people feel that even though we're getting older, there is so much we can do to help ourselves be the best version of who we are well into our 80s and 90s. So I'll see you next time. Bye bye.